If you've been injured at work and you're wondering when those checks are going to start coming, stay with me until the end. I'm going to explain to you the 3 types of checks under Georgia Workers' Compensation. I'm going to show you how to avoid one of the biggest mistakes that can stop your checks before they even start. Hello, I'm Ty Wilson. I'm a Georgia Workers' Compensation attorney practicing law in the state of Georgia. And so our topic for today is weekly checks in Georgia Workers' Compensation. What are they? How do you get them? And how are they calculated? And when and where do they come from? All right, so in Georgia, there are 3 types of workers' compensation income benefits. You have TTD, also known as temporary total disability. You have TPD, temporary partial disability. And then you have PPD, permanent partial disability. Temporary total disability means that your doctor has taken you out of work completely and has not released you to light duty, limited duty, or modified duty. Just wants you to sit at home, rest, and recover. Temporary partial disability is where the doctor says you can do some type of work. They've given you light duty restrictions, modified work, limited or light duty work. No lifting more than 10 pounds, 50 pounds, 20 pounds, what have you. No bending, no stooping, one-armed work, just depends on the nature of your injury. That would be temporary partial disability, would fall under the light duty restrictions. And then lastly, we have permanent partial disability, which tends to be at the end. Typically what has happened is the doctor says, I don't think there's anything else medically I can do to improve your condition. So I believe you are at what's called MMI, maximum medical improvement. And I'm going to ask you to go do and participate in what is called a functional capacity evaluation. They will rate you and give you a rating on what your impairment rating is. And then I will sign off on it or change it accordingly. And then we will release you from care. Now, here's what surprises some people the most, and that is that you don't just automatically get those checks. You have to qualify to get the income benefit checks. And how you qualify is you go to an authorized treating physician. The authorized treating physician either takes you out of work completely or puts you on light duty restrictions, and your employer cannot accommodate those light duty restrictions. Now, for the first 7 days, no one gets income benefits. However, if you're out of work for 21 days consecutively, the first 7 days get paid. And so what happens a lot of times is these adjusters will not issue checks come day 8. We owe him money, so let's just go ahead and cut him a check. Not the case. They usually wait, usually closer to 21 days, to see, are they going to need to pay you for 3 full weeks or 2 weeks or less? And so that's what normally happens. You need to know that because you need to plan. There could be 3 weeks where you're not looking at income benefits, not looking at work benefit, or looking for checks from work, etc. So that's something you need to plan for with your family. So how are these checks calculated? Well, these checks are calculated on your pre-injury income. And so what they do is they look at 13 weeks prior, before your injury, and they average out your pay. If you're paid weekly, we look at 13 weeks. If you're paid bi-weekly, we tend to look at 14 weeks since it's every 2 weeks. That would be 7 paychecks. And they take the gross amount of your pay and they average it out. And that is what is called your average weekly wage. Then they pay you 2/3 and or 67% of your average weekly wage. That is what is known as your comp rate. And that's up to the state maximum, which currently is at $800 per week. Now, if you were injured many, many years ago, the state maximum could have been less. It changes from time to time, not every single year, but it does change from time to time. So if you have any questions about what the maximum was, certainly you can take a look at the Georgia State Board of Workers' Comp. They may have some information for you, or you can reach out to a Georgia Workers' Compensation attorney. The checks. Typically, the checks come from the insurance company for the workers' compensation, for the employer. So it's the workers' compensation insurance carrier who usually pays the weekly income benefit checks. However, if your employer says, I'm not going to pay you through workers' comp, I'm going to pay you a salary like you were earning before, the employer can do that. It just doesn't happen very often. Certainly under the workers' compensation system, it saves them money from their payroll. Now, things you need to know about that. If you're being paid through Georgia Workers' Compensation and not your employer, and you're getting any type of benefits like health insurance or anything like that, they're not paying you through their payroll, so they can't take that money out to pay for your benefits. So you may want to reach out to the employer proactively and say, hey, I want to keep my benefits, especially if you're planning on going back to work there. Otherwise, they'll stop the benefits or they'll hit you with the check 4 months later that is staggering, and you won't be able to keep them. So these are things you want to keep in mind. If you have any questions from this video, always advise you reach out to a Georgia workers' compensation attorney. These income benefits they're known as wage replacement benefits. They're not going to make you rich for sure, but what they are to do is keep you afloat while you're recovering from your work injury. So the number one question I get is, well, how do I get these checks started? Well, that all starts with that authorized treating physician. You've got to get to that doctor as quickly as possible, and they will make a determination. Are you out of work completely? Do you have light duty restrictions, or are you full duty? Those are the three options. If you are out of work completely, you want to make a copy of that work status. You always want to get a work status report. That is your ticket to getting these checks started. You want to send that over to the adjuster, ask that they start the benefits. If you are on limited, light, or modified duty, you want to share that with the adjuster, but you also want to share these work status reports with your employer. If you're on limited or light duty, they have the ability to bring you back to work in some capacity within your restrictions. Now, there's a lot that goes into that. Check out my other video. Very important, not the scope of this video. However, what is important is that you do share your work status report with your employer and the adjuster. They're not always communicating. That's not always clear. They will communicate when they need to, but they're not talking on the phone every week. So keep that in mind. Now, I promised at the end of this video that I would give you a helpful tip. The helpful tip is, don't assume that the insurance company will start your checks automatically. That's just not the case. You need to follow up, you need to track, and you need to keep your work status reports, as those are your tickets. And you want to make copies if you have to give anybody a copy. But those are your tickets to getting your weekly checks. Document every conversation. It's too important. This is you and your family's livelihood, possibly for the indeterminate future, depending upon how serious your injury is. In order to make this process easier, I've developed something called a check tracker, and we're happy to share that with you if you're interested in getting a free copy. If you'll contact us at the number on the screen or below, we'll be happy to send that to you free of charge. We hope this information's been helpful, and we will see you on the next video. Thank you.